Hey guys, now in this video let's actually work with Graph API. So again, using Graph API we can connect to Azure Tenant from our C# code. So for example, using Graph API we can read the users from tenant, we can invite new user in tenant from our C# code. Now in this video we will create ASP.NET Core Web API project in Visual Studio. That means we will create this user management API and it will have an operation that is get all users. That means this operation will return all the users from our tenant, that is all the users from our Active Directory. And of course guys, I will share this code on the GitHub as well. And now let's go to the Azure portal and let's add a few users in our Active Directory. So guys, we are in Azure portal and now let's click on this Microsoft Entra ID. So we are in this Active Directory and under users, can you see this one? Let's click on it. So as of now there is only one user in this tenant, that is in this Active Directory. So let's add a few users. So here I will say invite external user and I will add this user. So that will be the email ID and that will be the name of the users. So I will say review plus invite. And similarly I have added one more user. So total we have 3 users in this Active Directory. And now let's go to the Visual Studio and let's use Graph API to fetch this users list. So guys, we are in Visual Studio and I have created this project, that is Graph API demo. So it is ASP.NET Core Web API project, and inside controllers I have created one controller, that is UserManagementController. And if you observe this code, see this, it has this method that is getTenantUsers, and as of now it returns the hard-coded list of users, right? And if we run this program, see it returns this list, right? Or we can test it like this as well, that is using this Swagger screen. Okay, and now let's actually use Graph API, right? So let's just stop this execution, right click on this project, add new folder, I will say services, and let's add an interface. So right click, I will say add new item, interface, and here I will say IUserManagementService.cs, I will say add, and here I will add a method that it will return task of list of user. I will say get all tenant users. Now guys, first we have to add required NuGet packages. So right click on this project, NuGet packages, browse, and I will say Microsoft Graph. Let's install this first one, install. We have to install one more, that is Azure Identity. So again let's install this one. Now let's go back to our interface again, and this user, it will be Microsoft.graph.models, and obviously now we have to create an implementation of this service, right? So again services, I will say add new item, I will say add this class, that is UserManagementService.cs. see it's a class, I will say add, and obviously it will implement that interface. Yes, and obviously we have to implement that method, right? So I will say implement this interface, and of course now here we have to write our logic which will fetch the users from tenant, right? So first thing I will say private read only, I will say graph service client underscore graph service client, and here I will create this constructor. So right click, I will say quick actions, I will say generate constructor, and to this we need to inject configuration, and this is configuration. Now see guys, we need to fetch the users from this tenant, right? So first we need tenant ID. Then if you remember in our last video, we have created an app registration for this service, that is that app registration will help us to retrieve the list of users, right? So that was ClientID, and let me show you that. So guys, if you remember in our last video, in this tenant, that is in this default directory, we created this app registration. See this, and this is the client ID of this app registration, that is this B266. And we also need client secret as well. And if you see in this app registration, see this client credentials. So we have added one secret, and see this is the value, and obviously this value is visible only once. Okay. So again, we need tenant ID, client ID, and client secret, right? And we have configured these settings in our app settings, and let me show you that. So guys, this is our section Azure AD, and we have configured tenant ID, client ID, and client secret. So first thing, we need to read these settings in our user management service, and now let's do that. So here I will say read tenant ID, client ID, and client secret from configuration. See again guys, I will share this complete code on the GitHub. Okay. And now from this we have to create client secret credential. So we'll say where client secret credentials is equal to new client secret credential, and to this we have to provide tenant ID, client ID, and client secret. And now using it, we have to create graph service client. So let's just copy this. I'll say graph service client is equal to new graph service client, and to this we have to provide this client secret credentials. So that's it guys. Basically now here we have configured this graph service client, which will read the list of users from this tenant. And now in this method, let's add that code to get the list of users. So here I will say where users is equal to, I will say underscore graph service client dot users, and here I will paste this code. So basically here from the tenant we are retrieving these properties of the user, that is ID, display name, mail, and user principal name. For rest of the fields it will return as null. Okay. And here I will say await, and here I will say return users dot value dot to list. And of course we have to make this method as async, and let's just save. So it seems it's working, right? And now we have to inject this IUserManagementService in our controller, right? So that it can actually fetch the users information from tenant. So let's do that. So again, UserManagementController, and here I will say private read only IUserManagementService. Yes, UserManagementService, and let's inject that. So right click, I'll say quick actions, I'll say generate constructor. Okay, and let's just comment this code, and here I will say where users is equal to, I will say underscore UserManagementService dot get all tenant users, and obviously we have to say await, and here I will return this users, and again we have to mark this method as async. So it looks like our code should work. So let's just save, let's build, and let's run. So we have this Swagger page. Let's expand. I will say try it out, and I will say execute. We have got 500 error, and it says unable to resolve this service, that is IUserManagementService. So obviously we have not registered it, right? So let's do that. Let's close this. Let's open program.cs, and here I will say builder.services.add scoped. I will say IUserManagementService, UserManagementService. So let's run our project again. Let's expand. I'll say try it out, execute. So it says 200 OK, and yes, we have returned the response as well, and this is the response body. And if we check this, see display name Harshal Kumar Jain, see this user principal name, again display name. So basically we have retrieved the list of users from tenant, but then there is one problem. There are a lot of unnecessary fields over here, right? So now in our next video, let's modify our project to retrieve only the required fields like email, display name, etc. So that's it guys. Thanks for listening.